Good morning. It is Friday, the 5th of June. I'm Maeve McMahon and this is Europe Today. Your morning dose of European news and context live here on Euronews. Coming up, EU enlargement is at the top of the agenda today as EU leaders gather in Montenegro with their Western Balkan partners. We'll be crossing live to Euronews' Maria Tadeo, who spoke exclusively to the European Council President, Antonio Costa. Meanwhile, the Iran-backed group Hezbollah has rejected a ceasefire proposal agreed by the Lebanese and Israeli governments in US-mediated talks. The group says Israel must withdraw all troops from southern Lebanon, but Israel's defence minister says the IDF would be continuing operations on the ground to, quote, dismantle terrorist infrastructure. Plus, EU justice ministers are meeting in Luxembourg to discuss whether or not to extend the legal protection of Ukrainian men of military age who are currently living inside the European Union. EU sources told Euronews that a formal proposal will come out soon. But first, up to 30 European heads of state are meeting in Tivat, Montenegro today with leaders from Western Balkan countries. The gathering is set to push EU enlargement up the list of priorities. For the latest, we can go now live straight to the town of Tivat in Montenegro, where our Europe editor, Maria Tadeo, is this morning for us. Great to have you with us, Maria. So it's a big day for the Balkans. But what's exactly happening beyond, of course, the photo ops and the handshakes?
Well, of course, morning, Maeve. This summit now about to start between European Union leaders, of course, and the Western Balkan countries. This is an important day for Montenegro.
And we seem to be having technical difficulties there speaking to Maria Tadeo, but don't worry, we'll bring you back. We'll go back to Maria a little bit later in the programme, but now we can actually play her exclusive interview with the EU Council President. That's, of course, Antonio Costa.
This summit is coming in a very important momentum when clearly Montenegro is doing very well. We have already approved the Working Party to start drafting the accession treaty. Last week, we have a new intergovernmental conference with Albania, and the Commission this week proposed to close 3 chapters in the Albanian negotiations. We will discuss new proposals to accelerate this process to avoid precisely this idea that we are not going so well because it's not a reality, but it's very important to increase the trust in the European Union and increase also the motivation in the candidate states to be very clear that we are moving forward and we want to deliver on this process.
And you mentioned Montenegro. Of course, we've been in the streets of this beautiful town and they all say it's 28 by 28. They believe they will hit this deadline. Is that the case when you've had your conversations bilateral this week?
Well, they are doing very well. Now it's possible to close half the chapters before summer. And then we have 3 very hard-working months to try to close by the end of this year. And of course, in 2027, the first half of the year, we are more focused on the elections in different countries. But for sure, the second part of the year, we can come back on this issue. And if everything is okay, it will be possible. It's not impossible to be the 28th member states in 2028.
And President, some would argue because enlargement is now needed, and you say it yourself, it is a geopolitical imperative, some suggest the time to really think outside of the box has really come. Enlargement will be about merit, but maybe perhaps it's time to look at solutions as reverse membership, perhaps step-by-step membership has been signaled. There's the idea of joining without a veto. What's thinking outside the box for you?
Now, there are different things. First, the process is merit-based and will remain merit-based. Other thing is to simplify the proceedings. Perhaps you can reduce the moments then we take decisions.
To streamline it.
To streamline it. This is one thing. Other thing, finally, is the transitional period. We learned from the previous enlargement process that we always adopted transitional clauses on policies like agriculture, freedom of movement, and so on. And now, because we are talking about a very challenging enlargement, perhaps we need also transitional clauses on institutional matters. But it's early to discuss this. But it's important, for instance, the President Vučić and Prime Minister Rama came publicly some months ago proposing some ideas, Chancellor Merz also, and for sure we will discuss a proposal from France and Germany to simplify the proceedings to move forward in this enlargement process.
What it says to me is that there is an appetite to explore different solutions. Is that something that you also feel? This perhaps there's not a landing zone yet, but ultimately that is a direction of travel.
No,
this enlargement will be different.
All of these discussions about the proceedings, about the transitional period, about the simplification of our rules to work, all of this shows our common ambition to deliver as soon as possible in this enlargement process. This shows the really will of the member states and also the candidates to join the EU and to achieve this enlargement.
And President, you have been on a tour of the region. You were in Serbia. You spoke with the Serbian President, Aleksandar Vučić. Of course, this is a country that is fundamental when you look at the Western Balkans, but some would argue, and the Commission says it openly, that not only the process is not moving ahead, there's actual serious backsliding in fundamental questions like the judiciary, the media, as you cited. These are key parts of a democracy. What was your one-on-one conversation with Aleksandar Vučić?
No, it's true that last January they stepped back on the judiciary, but now they are changing the law.
You're confident they will do it this time?
They are doing, and they are full committed to comply with the recommendations from the Venice Commission. The Venice Commission has a meeting the next 12th of June, and immediately after they will approve the new law to correct what they made in last January on the judiciary.
And do you trust that President Vučić will do it this time around? Because some would argue there has been many promises made in the past, but actually not delivered. When you sat down with him privately, did you make it clear it's you now that needs to move?
It's not a matter of faith. It's very simple. They know what they need to do, and we are here to verify if they do or if they don't do. If they do, we move forward. If they don't do, we're still blocked. My conviction is everybody understood this. There remains a problem with the body who needs to regulate the freedom of press. And this is an ongoing process with the civil society and with the government.
And you stress that to him?
Yes, of course.
And just on a different final point, now, of course, this week there has been major developments when it comes to Ukraine and Moldova, also by extension, on their negotiations, opening these formal talks. Now Hungary has dropped that veto. What does that mean for the European Union and ultimately for the three countries?
No, I think it's very important, first of all, for the bilateral relations between Hungary and the Ukraine. And Prime Minister Magyar announced that he believed that in 3 weeks they are in conditions to release the veto and we can move forward. We are very advanced, and I believe that it's possible to open and at the same time close immediately several chapters because they have already done what they need to do to close the chapters.
This is a huge symbolic moment for Ukraine. This process had been stuck for 3 years. This is, if it happens and materializes, is the start of something new. What does that say to you? Where is this union going? Does it mean it's a return to 27 unanimity? What do you read politically out of this?
Look, I believe that we don't need to have the unanimity to open chapters and clusters. We just need the unanimity to close chapters and clusters. Secondly, that the bilateral issues must be addressed for the different countries in order to don't block an entire process. And it's very positive that Prime Minister Magyar gave this clear sign that we are now leading with a new government, with a new policy in Hungary, and with the new attitude of Hungary in the European Union.
And just lastly, your final summit with Viktor Orban in attendance, you said nobody can blackmail the European Council. Do you feel validated?
No, the Hungarians understood. If Viktor Orban believed that someone in Hungary will rewind him for try to block a decision of the European Council, he was wrong.
Well, President Costa, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Our Maria today there, speaking exclusively to Antonio Costa as that Western Balkan summit gets underway today in Tivat, Montenegro. And we can actually bring in Maria Tadeo now as those leaders are gathering. Maria, tell us what is happening.
Good morning, Maeve. And of course, technical difficulties because you see ultimately this helicopter that is hovering around this town repeatedly now for almost 2 days. There's a lot of jamming because ultimately you have more than 35 leaders, if you combine the EU institutions and the Western Balkans, gathering here on an important day with Montenegro because, as I say, multiple diplomats from this country insisting, talking to Yuronius, saying this will be 28 member states by 2028. And you saw from that interview with the head of the European Council, Antonio Costa, telling us this is a merit-based process. It will always be, but some of those rules need to be simplified. Picking up on that point, the French and the Germans now laying out the scene for a discussion today here in which they will quote, and call for a more structured, gradual integration of these candidates to motivate them to reform. The more they do, the more progress they make, the more benefits diplomats say they will be able to tap, including, by the way, access to the single market. And that is key because the single market is the moneymaker for the European Union. Just very briefly, for our viewers, the leaders confirmed to participate. The Serbian president, there was a lot of speculation as to whether or not Aleksandar Vučić would join this summit. We are told he is here. He landed yesterday. The leader who will not be, and there was also speculation about him, is the new Hungarian Prime Minister, Peter Magyar. We're not expecting him to participate at the summit, but of course he's one of the big protagonists with that breakthrough over with Ukraine, Maeve.
OK, Maria Tadeo, thank you so much for that live broadcast there. And of course, for more of Maria's reporting there on the ground, you can visit Yuroniewz.com or keep an eye on Yuroniewz TV for her various interviews throughout the day. But now we can actually zoom into more about why the Western Balkans are so strategically important for Brussels. Our reporter, Jakub Janis, has this report.
Top EU chiefs are gathering in Tivat, Montenegro for the EU Western Balkans summit. And Albania, Serbia, Montenegro, Bosnia and Herzegovina, North Macedonia and Kosovo are at various stages of trying to join the bloc. And that's cool, but your reporter is curious. With the EU already struggling to manage 27 member states, what's the point of Brussels pushing for enlargement right now? Let's see the map, because geographically the region is completely surrounded by the EU. And for nearly 2 decades, a period of relative calm kept enlargement on the back burner. But Russia's invasion of Ukraine shattered that peace, turning EU expansion into a critical security priority. But it's also about money. Look, the EU is already the region's primary trading partner and investor. And only last year, the total trade reached over 87 billion euros. And we're talking about a massive two-way exchange of heavy machinery, chemicals and metals flowing back and forth across the border. And hear me out on that. The EU exported far more than it imported, running a handsome profit. Yet, the EU is not the only power eyeing the region, oh no. Brussels faces immense outside pressure because Moscow, Beijing and Washington are all actively competing for strategic influence there. So if Europe leaves power vacuum on its doorstep, others will gladly fill it. And the region has already become a new frontline for geopolitical tensions. It is most visible in Serbia, where the government refuses to align with EU sanctions against Moscow. Finally, EU capitals fear adding more nations will paralyze decision-making under the current voting rules. This is why Albania and Serbia proposed a phased integration, temporarily waiving their veto rights just to get through the door. And as European Council Chief Antonio Costa travels around the region, Brussels is no longer driven by an idealistic dream of European unity. This is a cold calculation to secure borders. Because if the EU doesn't act, the alternative is a region politically dependent on Russia, economically reliant on Chinese investment, or potentially turned into the 51st state of the US, as it was already suggested with Greenland, or Iceland, or Canada. I mean, you get the point.
Jakub Fabianis there on the high stakes of that EU Western Balkan summit that comes as protesters are flocking to the streets of neighbouring Albania to speak out against the construction of a $1.6 billion luxury resort backed by President Donald Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner. More on that story on Yurinews.com. But now, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has sent an open letter to the Russian president. In it, he says that Vladimir Putin is under pressure from his own people. He calls for a one-on-one meeting to end the war. The letter arrived as Putin was answering questions from the press in St. Petersburg. For more, we can bring in our Ukraine correspondent, Sasha Vakalina, who's on the move today. Good morning, Sasha. Thanks for joining us. It's quite an interesting read. Tell us more about this letter and what exactly prompted it.
Absolutely, Maeve. In an unprecedented step, for the first time since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, over 4 years ago, Volodymyr Zelensky released the first open letter to Putin, addressing Russian president directly and personally with a very clear message, quote, "The choice is yours now. Enough of war. Ukraine proposes to end this war. I am proposing a meeting," Zelensky said. Now, he also provided more details about the possible venue for the meeting. He said that Vladimir Putin spent over half of his 26 years term as the leader of Russia waging the war against Ukraine, and therefore there is nothing for Ukraine's president to do in Moscow, same way as there is nothing for Russian president to do in Kyiv. Therefore, Zelensky said that the meeting could possibly take place in one of the mediating countries. That could be Switzerland, that could be Turkey, or that could be some of the Middle Eastern countries, he said. Now, Zelensky also commented on who else could be participating in this meeting, in these talks. He said that he would want to see the United States participating there because he said Washington is the one who can guarantee and participate in building the new security architecture in this part of the world. But also he said that since the war is taking place in Europe, Zelensky believes that Europe has to be at that negotiating table and has to be present at the future meeting. But the message there, maybe, is clear. He clearly and openly told Vladimir Putin, you can't stop your war.
OK, Sasha Vakalina, thank you so much for that live update there. Now, the ongoing war in Ukraine, confrontations with China over trade, a more hostile US that no longer shares the interests of the EU, and Europe's innovation problems. Just a glimpse of some of the serious matters being discussed today and yesterday at the Brussels Economic Security Conference hosted by the European Policy Centre. Our correspondent Shona Murray has been covering the event and moderating it as well and joins us now live this morning. Good morning, Shona. Just tell us what's on the agenda today.
Well, good morning, Maeve. As we know, and as you mentioned there, Europe is facing so many challenges on various fronts, not least, of course, the war in Ukraine and the urgent need for Europe to step up in investment when it comes to security and defence. We also have an acknowledgement across Europe and in Brussels here that the US is no longer the reliable partner it used to be. So there needs to be a move away from interdependence with Chinese and United States tech. There's also overcapacity when it comes to Chinese exports. So in order to face these challenges, there needs to be massive scaling up of investment because, as we heard from the famous Mario Draghi report, Europe could be in mortal danger. And in order to speak about this, I'm joined by Nadia Calvino, President of the European Investment Bank. You're very welcome. Tell us, first of all, the EIB has really changed in the last couple of years because of the war in Ukraine and has started to invest, for example, in security and defence, something that would have been maybe unheard of 10 years ago.
Absolutely. 2025 has been a game changer for the EIB in this area. We have expanded the scope of the activities we finance so that now we are financing pure military as well as funds and companies that are active in all areas of defense. And we have also increased the ceilings for this investment so the investment has multiplied ×4. And we are on track to meet our target this year of financing 5% of our total finance in the EU, devoting it to security and defence.
And it's not, I suppose, direct kinetic goods that you're investing in, is it? Or what? How do you sort of get away with not providing directly bullets and guns and so on? What kind of investment in defence and so on?
Well, Europe has massive needs, and the European Investment Bank is uniquely placed to finance large-scale infrastructures with long-term loans, also research and development, large-scale programs of leading companies, Thales or Indra in Europe, for example. Industrial capacity, we're financing quantum systems, production of drones, and also financing small-sized companies that are supplying in the supply chain of large European contractors, and the emerging ecosystem of private venture capital funds that are specializing in this area. Actually, in 2026, we're going to launch a new wave of financing capital injections in this area of investment funds.
I mean, also, since the war in Ukraine, we've also noticed, not noticed, it's been a major issue, is Europe's energy dependence on Russia initially, but also the implications of the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, getting gas and oil to the European continent. Tell us about the plans for Europeans' energy independence.
Well, I think that in the last years, in the war in Ukraine and now the escalation of the conflict in the Middle East, send a very clear message to Europe, and that is we need to break free from our dependence on fossil fuels. It's clear. And the European Investment Bank, being the climate bank, is very well placed and is actually financing large-scale infrastructures, for example, grids, interconnectors. Half of the projects ongoing in Europe are financed by the EIB. Also, we're financing energy efficiency for SMEs, research and development of new fuels, clean tech autonomy and Europe's strategic autonomy and economic security in this area, solar, wind. We are very well placed, I think. And what we see is also that there is strong demand for EIB financing in this area. So I think that we will also hit a record this year in terms of financing for the clean transition to make it a European success.
And the other piece that we heard from the European Commission this week is around tech sovereignty and the need for the EU and Europe to have its own access to the tech sector and tech services because of concerns around security. And that is going to be requiring massive scale-up on investment. Tell us about the plans for that and how quickly they can be done.
Yeah, absolutely. Europe needs to have technological leadership and also autonomy when it comes to key components of these solar and wind infrastructures, for example. In that sense, we are moving quite fast. Only earlier this week, I was in Spain. We signed an important financing agreement for the research program of a company called Ingeteam, present everywhere around the world, that produces solar inverters. And that allows us to scale up Europe's capacity in an area which is quite critical for the solar panel deployment. So from the European Investment Bank, we are supporting the approach of the European Commission and accompanying and joining the European Commission in ensuring that Europe becomes independent, not only when it comes to the fuel supply, but also when it comes to the technologies and industrial capacity.
Okay, Nadia Calvino, and you'll be speaking later on the next hour or so here at the Brussels Economic Security Forum. Thank you very much for joining us on Euronews. And back to you, Maeve.
Thank you so much, Shona Murray, and of course to Nadia Calvino, the head of the EIB there. And thank you so much for tuning into us this morning on Europe Today. For more news and analysis on that EU Western Balkan Summit taking place in Tivat, Montenegro today, do stay with us here on Euronews or visit euronews.com for longer reads. Take care. Thanks so much for tuning in and see you soon on Euronews.